Hello, trade professionals. Welcome to the Simply Trade News Roundup. My name is Anik, as you all know already, I hope. And I'm here in the studio, virtual studio, with Lalo and Andy. Hi, guys. How are you?
Good morning.
Good, thank you.
All right. Well, we have some fun articles for you today, talking a lot more on forced labor as things are kind of shifting in that area. And I think we've seen it for a while now. But the U.S. is really taking a stand here and making some moves to protect the U.S. and protect kind of like, people in ways. So they added 3 companies to the list bearing imports tied to the Uyghur forced labor in China. So these targeted firms include shoe manufacturer, aluminum makers, and food processors in Xinjiang, Xinjiang, there?
In China.
In Xinjiang. Yeah. So, so the Chinese embassy denies allegations of forced labor, calling them a tool to destabilize the region and contain China's development. I think this is basically, I'm calling bluff on China because I think they're just really trying to get out of it. And maybe they think that the United States is a little stupid or something. But yeah, so they have put them on the list. And all right, so I guess right away, Andy, you said we should tie it right into the second article, right?
Yeah, so I would say, let me offer a suggestion. It's like, so there's obviously in this article that there were 3 more companies added to the list that the U.S. is denying. But now let me go on to a second article. The 2 are related. Yeah.
All right. So here we have the 3 companies that have been added, and I'm tying it in with another article, which Lalo was so kindly to provide, because sometimes I don't find the nitty-gritty of articles in the trade world, which there's a lot because there's so much happening. And the head of the Forced Labor Enforcement Task Force warns that companies not proactive on UFLPA compliance may face sudden enforcement actions, which obviously I feel like that was known, but Volkswagen's self-reporting of a component from a company on the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act entity list is highlighted as a positive example in this kind of article. So I kind of wanted to tie those together since they're both about forced labor. But what is kind of the outtake from these 2 articles? Like, how do we move forward from reading this and getting this new knowledge? Like, where do you think this is going? And how can people in those kind of industries, what are their choices at this point? If they were dealing with those companies, like, what do they do? How can they stay proactive in the forced labor
prevention
subject or whatever? Yeah. And yeah, let's just talk about that, because I feel like that's going to be the most beneficial from these articles.
Well, Lala, I want to say before we start getting into it, what I'm seeing, and I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, but folks, if you're looking at this, what I'm kind of seeing right now is we're moving from in transition, if you will, in the overall era of this anti-slavery legislation and whatnot. We're moving from you need to be doing things. Here's the legislation. Here's the bureaucracy that has been put together and from the different agencies into more enforcement. There's more things that people are the government is identifying specific companies that have apparently been using forced labor. And so there is a list as far as in the U.S. I know other countries around the world are zeroing in on the anti-slavery things, but the U.S. has got their list of people that they're zeroing in on specific companies. So they have this list of banned products. So in other words, products you should not be using or doing business with, as far as companies and their products. And taking it a step further, there's more and more actual enforcement that's coming into play. Do you see that, Lalo?
I do, and actually, what I'm looking at is it's very interesting to see how now we're seeing a lot more involvement by DHS. I'm not saying they never were, but I'm seeing a lot more involvement in DHS in setting policy. I mean, I guess just a really quick rundown, and sorry if I'm insulting anybody's intelligence here or anything, but technically DHS sets the policies and CBP enforces them. And we normally only hear the enforcement part, meaning CBP is catching all these bad actors, et cetera. But lately, we have seen DHS adding more and more and more entities to this list, therefore giving CBP more, what is it called, broader outreach, or I'm trying to find the term, but that where they can now enforce more of these laws, because they're identifying actual companies who are manufacturing under forced labor. So, but yeah, it's definitely true. It's just something that we've seen a lot of.
All right. Well, I think that's that. And so I don't know if I can mention this, but now that we're talking about forced labor, we actually have, and we can cut this out if I'm not allowed to say, but we have a course on Global Training Center coming up, and it's the Forced Labor Supply Chain Tracing course, which is going to be extensive. I mean, it's going to be an extensive course that will really educate people and, give certain intel and strategies and stuff, which is something really to look forward to, especially if you are dealing with such situations or just want to stay prepared. I think it's a perfect course, and we will definitely update you if you're interested. You can also go to globaltrainingcenter.com/forced labor supply chain tracing. And there's the page already, and you can sign up for our emails. That way we can email you when it is ready. So that is up just to, ahead of time, letting you know.
That would be, Anik, I think that is outstanding because, folks, that's one of the things you need to get up to speed. A lot of folks will look at this and you're trying to figure out, well, I'm supposed to check it out. The owner of the company, the executive leadership have said, hey, let's make sure we're compliant. What do I do? So, folks, check out the Global Training Center's course that's coming up, as well as, it will give you some guidance. It's not going to be the answer to all things, but it's at least give you direction. That is paramount. So,
but the thing that we're doing, and actually that program that we're putting together is actually a lot more than just training. Within the training, we're also going to go through a simulation of how it is or what it is that you need. It's basically a workshop. So on what it is and what you need to do to comply or screen or get to the end tier level of being compliant and finding out if any of your components or anything in your supply chain is forced labor. We'll also go through a simulation of a WRO and what you need to do in case that happens. We are taking every single episode that we have ever recorded, not news, but just guests that have come to the podcast, and we're putting all those together in a big bundle. And we're also getting ready to invite several companies that have reached out to us who want to present their solutions for our audience as to how to fight forced labor, of course, and just screen and be compliant. So it's going to be it's a lot more than just the training. And by the way, that training is the same training that we did for CBP. We're just packaging it up a little differently for the public, for the importers. So it's
whenever we're ready. Go on our page, which we do have the page. It has limited information, but whenever we're ready, just hit the button so we can send you an email for that, because we will send you an email once we're ready.
And let me mention this too, is that we've had some shows. We've got some more shows coming up. that you to really effectively deal with this on an ongoing basis, you've got to incorporate the use of some appropriate systems. And there are systems out there that from several different companies that use AI technology that will help your compliance and your company personnel deal with the massive amounts of data and run it through different algorithms and processes and whatever that will isolate or at least put in red flags of areas that you need to look at and say, this needs more investigation, whatever. But it's the same type of thing that the government is doing off of your shipments, yours and everybody else's. They're using this AI technology, and that's how they're able to find more and more of this stuff that's going on. So
the cool thing is that this week, for everybody who's listening to this show on Monday before Thursday, but anyway, this week we're going to have a really good episode when we have Alan Burson and Evan.
Oh my gosh!
He's the CEO of Altana. And it's amazing. It's a really good show. Yeah. Everybody needs to listen to that episode because we do go through a lot of different things based on. It's not a demo by any means at all. It's just a conversation on systems and AI and how it gets to the bottom of finding that information.
Yep. Excellent. So definitely be looking for that. Again, that's an outstanding show, folks. And I know it's self-promoting in a sense, but I mean, this is a show that I have a lot of us. Evan is the CEO, is said of Altana, but Alan Burson was former commissioner of customs, and what a phenomenal guy and unbelievable leader. And he and Evan have some phenomenal things to talk about in strategy of the use of AI and what's coming down.
All right. Okay. Thank you, guys. But we have one more article to cover, which we are, there seems to be a labor strike looming around here as there's a few negotiations. The International Longshoremen's Association has suspended talks planned for this week, which I think it was last week, but it's still relevant, with the United States Maritime Alliance about a new labor contract for East Coast and Gulf Coast ports. So the union claims that APM terminals and Maersk, whatever, have been... Maersk.
It's a German company. You ought to know how to say that one.
But we would use... We would use the A. We would use the A that has two dots on top of it, like Maersk. Right. I think that's only why they put the A-E.
I think technically you're pronouncing it right, Anna, because it is German. Yes. But we here in the western part of the world or in the U.S. we say Maersk.
Oh, Maersk. Oh, yeah. I think it's Maersk because A and E together is an A for us. Anyways, Maersk have been using automated technology to process trucks at port terminals without union labor in violation of current agreements.
The violation is being accused of the labor side, whereas if you look at it, this is going to be interesting. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I jumped in on you.
I mean, no, let's talk about because
okay, so here's what's happening. All right, so now this union wave, if you will, of strikes and potential strikes and all that. If you think back almost as much of a year ago, Lalo and I were talking on things, and the longshoremen on the western seaboard have western coast, if you will, were striking. And I said then is that you watch, it's going up and down the western seaboard, up even into Canada. Canada actually, the union there did throw in a strike. The Western U.S. ports did not, but when companies were, carriers were trying to divert from the Vancouver ports to other U.S. ports, the longshoremen said they were not going to process those ships. And I have issues with the way they're doing it. I understand trying to come together and work on something, but they're holding the entire country and the supply chain hostage. Okay, so with that, I said, you watch what's going to happen is now the unions are going to be emboldened to do the strikes, and it'll work itself across the country. So you had the Western region that was threatening to strike. Then you had, I said, it's going to hit the automakers. It's going to hit the Teamsters with UPS. It's going to hit the airlines. It's going to hit the railroads. And now we're hitting the Eastern Seaboard. And it's the Eastern ports and the Gulf Coast ports. And so they're looking at, obviously, trying to get a better contracts and whatnot. But the biggest bone of contention on this is the lack of, the unions are fighting any kind of automation that is put into these ports. Are you kidding me? This is one of those things that, folks, stop and look at this for a second. This is a travesty to where the lack of use of automation. Oh, well, it's replacing people. You have a problem trying to fulfill or fill these positions. And the use of automation works in many aspects. But oh no, the union in this case is fighting it. In my opinion, this is a case where it's not really a strong argument. However, they've used this as an excuse to stop talks and to talk about it and figure out what they're going to do next. And the threat of a strike on the Eastern and Gulf ports. Here's the other thing. If you are in any port in the Gulf or Eastern Seaboards in some of these southern states or whatever that is non-union, you better be advertising is like, hey, folks, come to our port. We'll take care of you, because I guarantee you people are getting sick of this. However, the issue here is what you're going to see is the labor rates and different rules, if you will, are going to jump anywhere from 36 to as much as maybe 45% higher. Well, what do you think that's going to do? That's going to drive up the port fees and drive up costs basically for everybody. And it's just going to be another domino effect. So just be aware of that. The contract actually ends in September. The one thing to the credit is that the unions on the eastern side, the longshoremen on the eastern Gulf Coast have a history of negotiating and getting contracts completed and agreed to well before the end of the contract. So they avoid strikes. That's a good thing. In this case, though, the union is the one that's walking away from the table. So your own state legislatures need to be looking at this and putting pressure on the unions. Is like, get your butt back to the table. And you, if you're not talking, then, you're not having a chance of working this thing out. It goes back and forth. I understand that. I'm just not a fan of the organized labor unions in this particular case, because it's not the companies that will end up losing out. It is the average consumer. You and me are going to wind up paying more because of what they're doing. So that's just a comment on that. So,
I guess just me being who I am, and there's got to be a solution in the sense that, why not work out a deal where maybe these workers, instead of, why not train them in something else that is like, maybe in systems. I mean, the software and the automations and the hardware used to do this AutoGate, and that by the way, that's what it's called, AutoGate. The way that
opening and closing of a gate. I mean, and
checking documents
that they want a body there.
Yeah, and so there's devices that are used, like cameras that verify the license plate. I can tell you this: at the El Paso airport, they recently went to a program where if you park in the parking lot, and this is very similar, it recognizes when you came in by your license plate, and as you're leaving, it knows how much you owe. It knows what, and it basically just automated little kiosk that's sitting there. It says, this is how much you owe. You scan your credit card and you're on your way. I mean, that is wicked faster than it was when we had people manually doing that. I mean, it might be a little comparison or not, but anyway, what I'm trying to say is somebody has to maintain that kiosk, for example. And I'm just using the example of real life, or not real life, of common non-trade or anything, here at the airport. Somebody needs to maintain those cameras. Somebody needs to maintain those kiosks. Somebody needs to update that software. Somebody needs to, so there's so many other jobs that could be done where maybe the union should be talking to like Maersk and what was it, ACM or ALM, or what was it called, APM, I'm sorry, that are using that technology. Maybe that's the way to go. I don't know. I'm just thinking, okay, I get it, they're losing their jobs, but at what cost? I mean, or why are things are getting through faster. They're getting screened a lot better. Maybe we can even add a little. They're more secure. The cargo, whatever. Whatever the case may be. By far, it's proven that it is better to do it automated than it is manually. So anyway, it's again, like Andy says, food for thought. But that's my opinion on that. Yeah, everybody needs to work, but maybe now it's a time to retrain these people and maybe move on to different things.
Well, and that's the thing again, is that in looking at this, if you're part of the union there and you're a front line and you see what's going on, if you don't agree with your union leadership, you need to be voicing that within your union stewards and up the chain. But also, if you are a state representative or state senator, you need to be looking at that and pulling in these union representatives in for discussion, or governors. Maybe it's the governors that's more appropriate. But the point is like, oh no, we're not going to have this kind of crap here. It's in looking at it, it's just one of those things where, just understand this: if there is a strike or a threat of a strike in some of these ports, what is the negative effect? And that's why they're doing it. Obviously, is for leverage. But what's the effect on your local community? How many people are going to be put out of work or reduced wages because of the way this is coming about? So it's one of these things where, I'm sorry, but I just don't agree with these type of tactics, the way this is going about. And it's evident that the union doesn't care one iota about the companies and what they're trying to do, nor the frontline employees in the area. They're looking at trying to make a statement and trying to go through this and see who can come up with the better contract out of one longshoreman port versus another of the airlines versus the automakers versus all this other stuff. And the negotiators are always trying to one up each other. Well, guess what? You and I suffer in the end on this.
We're suffering. Yeah. Well, let's not suffer. How about that? That's what I have to say. Those are my 2 cents to this, hopefully. But I guess I don't have a really fun fact. I do have a fact, but it's not a fun fact. It's kind of a fact that'll get you thinking about forced labor and taking our course and, listening to this episode, I guess. Is that there are 25 million people in situations of forced labor. When I saw that number, I was stunned. I mean, that's a whole lot. And in America, there is a growing number. And so on an average day in 2016, there were 1,280,000 people in situations of forced labor. That has grown as forced labor has become much more prominent, I would say. I mean, it's been around for so long, and I guess things are finally, getting to a point where we're having more regulations. Canceling, which is a pretty Gen Z word to say, is we're canceling some of these organizations because they're using forced labor, specifically in China. But I guess it's funny because we have a bright light on China and there's forced labor anywhere. So I guess it's just something to be very cautious with. And educated as much as you can, which is why we love to give you those resources that can truly help you become, your best self. In this situation. Wow, can you tell I'm like a very Gen Zer talking right now? That's what we would say, but it's the best way to get, thinking about this. Well, that was all we have for you this week. Let us know how you like this episode. Share with us if you want more, if you want something different. We always like to hear your feedback. It's very important to us to, keeps us going and keeps us giving you very good content. But so we hope we hope that you have a fabulous week. It is summer, so I'm sure a lot of people are off, enjoying some holidays. But hope you got to listen to this, and we will be back next week. Bye.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.